Everybody, Lance Russell and Dave Brown right along ringside. By golly, we're about ready to go with more big action.
Thank you very much, and welcome to Georgia Championship Wrestling. I'm Gordon Soler, your host, and we have quite an hour in store for us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Championship Wrestling at ringside. This is Vince McMahon, along with wrestling's only living legend, Bruno Sammartino.
Welcome to this week's edition of Mid-South Wrestling Television. I'm your host, Boyd Pierce, another outstanding card.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the Regional Rasslin Podcast, where we talk the territories. This week, I am proud to announce a new project here on Regional Rasslin, but some of the same old people, some of the same old crew coming back one more time. Now we're going to be tackling the ICW. It's Angelo Poffo's ICW. Going to be a fun time, and in order to do that, we had to bring on one of the true historians of the era. Well, he's maybe a super fan. I mean, he might want to go. We'll ask him in just a moment. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back, Steve Crawford.
Thank you. I think obsessive super fan is probably
the
right way to look at it. But I'm so excited about this project because ICW was the most, crazy outlaw, the most outlawest of the outlaw promotions. And, just so much fun history in ICW, and then so many of the people went on to do huge things in the world of wrestling. So it's really going to be a fun journey doing this project.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Of course, before we started the 77 project with the Tennessee split, I threw a couple of ideas at you, and we went with that one, which I was happy to do because, again, a lot of people, including myself, never really dissected it from beginning to end. So we had a blast with that. But as soon as we finished that up, you were like, I kind of want to start doing the ICW. And I said, absolutely. So you said, give me a little bit to do a little research. And here we are. I'm excited as well because this is truly an enigma. If you hear all the people always say, if you put a picture next to a word in the dictionary, outlaw promotion, absolutely ICW would have to go hand in hand with that. The stories we're going to tell you guys are unbelievable, but as far as we know, they're all true, to some degree anyway. So I can't wait to get into it. And for those of you who don't know, and I'm going to let Steve take it away here in just a moment, but the ICW basically came from one man. The ideals of it came from one man in one Angelo Poffo, who was the father of the Macho Man Randy Savage, and of course, Lanny Poffo. And so from there, I'm going to let you kind of take us all the way back like we always do whenever we start a new project here. We're going to set the stage and go back and kind of look at some of the people involved and then see how it came from that.
Here we go. All right. And I do, like I said, I'm kind of an obsessive super fan. I do want to pay respects to some of the research out there. Eric Westland has done a ton of writing and research on ICW over the years. Joe Stassi has one of the ICW Facebook web pages. Mm-hmm. Joe Clark is currently running the ICW Poffo Universe page. There was John Finkelbook on Randy Savage. I took a few quotes from. There's some of the message boards like Wrestling Classic message boards, and there's other things as well. I'm going to try to give everybody credit as I go along because, this certainly wasn't, Steve Crawford going out and finding all this information out firsthand. There's just a lot of, different parts that I'm pulling from to try to put a coherent story together.
I tried to do my best, but I've been digging in ICW stuff for probably more than 20 years now, but I still didn't envy you the task of you trying to make this all make sense and put everything together in a somewhat chronological order and things of that nature. So I'm here for it, man. I'm just happy to be here for the ride with you.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to give a little overview. Here's some of the things we might be talking about today. We're going to talk about the Poffo family background. We're going to talk about some interesting incidents the Poffos had in the ring before ICW, how the promotion got going off the ground. Working with the all-star crew out of Knoxville. Leapin' Lanny is a recording artist. That happened in 1979. The NWA lawsuit. And we're going to have spotlights on various things through these podcasts. The spotlight today is going to be on the legendary Poffo thriftiness and different perspectives that people have on that.
Something tells me, Steve, that we're going to have legendary Poffo thriftiness all throughout this entire project.
That's true. But just wanted to, I thought it was a good place to start because it so defines the Poffo aesthetic in so many ways.
Yeah. So that's a word for it.
There you go. See, I'm being a nice guy here today. Of course, Angelo Poffo, we'll start with him. He was born in Downers Grove in 1925. He set a world record for sit-ups while in the Navy in 1945. So when he was 20 years old, he was in the Navy. He did the 6,033 sit-ups. He would often have a robe that said 6,033 on the back of it later in his career.
Surprised he paid for it.
Yeah, yeah. He may have stitched it himself. I don't know.
That was on Ripley's Believe It or Not, too, I do believe.
I think so. Yeah, I think it was a world record. It was a world record at the time.
Yeah.
Played baseball for DePaul University, where he graduated in 1950. And he started pro wrestling in 1949, so shortly before he graduated. And he was one of the guys that appeared on the Dumont Network in the 1950s. So that was like early national network television. People forget about the Dumont Network because it went out of business in like 1956. But during its era, it was one of the primary networks like ABC, CBS, etc. Mm-hmm. Some of the gimmicks that would kind of resurface in the 1960s, Angelo teamed with the guy named Chris Markoff, and they were, quote, the Devil's Duo. So that gimmick will reappear in ICW.
Yeah.
And then in 1973, he was part of the Graduates with Ken Dillinger, and they would wear a cap and gown to the ring, similar to what Lanny would do as the Genius in the WWF.
Oh, yeah. I like how everything comes full circle here in the Poffo family. They even recycle their gimmicks.
It's kind of hysterical when people go, "Oh, Vince made wrestling so silly and so gimmicky." And then 1973, you got these grown men who are supposed to be in this rough and rugged sport wearing cap and gowns to the ring.
Right. Never too old to get a diploma, guys. Go back to school.
That's true. That's true. Eventually, Angelo settled down in Downers Grove, where he was from. He got a job as a PE teacher in the school system, and he just worked part-time. And then, according to Lanny, when the family got together at dinner and discussed what was going on in life, they really were focused on pro baseball. They loved pro baseball as a family. And that takes us to older brother Randy Savage, born in 1952. Played minor league baseball about 3 years, 1971 to 1974. He started working as a pro wrestler in 1973 and Phil Golden's All-Star Wrestling as the Graduate. So
imagine that.
So
hand me
just
down
had an extra
costume, I'm assuming.
Yeah. And I guess his first few years he was kind of working under a mask a lot because, he was, quote, a pro baseball player and he didn't want to be known as a wrestler. In the fall of 74, he worked under a mask as the Spider. His full-time career came in 75. He worked Florida, Detroit, Amarillo. He's working underneath in all these places. There's a program in Amarillo with an early picture of him, and he's billed as Jim Pride.
Which we will also hear again.
Yes. Yes, everything old is new again. So he made the rounds. He worked Georgia, the Carolinas, the Maritimes, Nashville before his father started ICW. Now, a real interesting precursor to ICW is Phil Golden's All-Star Wrestling. The Poffos worked for that company in like 72, 73. And I've actually heard that Angelo was one of the investors in that company. And that's where Lanny started. And guys like Pez Watley, George Weingroff, Paul Christie, all these future ICW people were working for that promotion.
And that was up in Paducah, down in Paducah, right? In Kentucky.
Paducah, Kentucky. Okay, it was where it was based. And I remember as a small kid seeing this wrestling clip, and I knew it wasn't from Memphis. I was like 7 or 8 years old. I think I saw a clip from this promotion.
That's awesome.
And I actually saw it twice. And the angle was a guy comes out there with like a sling and a cast, and he's a heel, and the announcer's like, "We haven't always, seen eye to eye, but, I'm sorry about your injury." And the guy's being very aw shucks about it and everything. And then the baby face comes out and he gets blasted with the cast, of course. And as I put that together in my mind, I probably saw that out of Cape Girardeau, Missouri, and it was probably Angelo Poffo, is my best guess, because I've always wondered where that was from. may have seen. I was very distraught as a young child
I would
from
imagine
such
so.
devious behavior.
Yeah, we didn't see a lot of angles like that back in the year. You had to be creative. The smaller the territory, the more, as you guys will find out, the smaller the territory, the more creative the angles. That's for sure.
That's true. And we know that Angelo used the cast gimmick later in Nashville when he was working there in '77 and just a few years down the line. So I imagine it was him that I saw as a small kid. All right. The Poffos had some interesting early times in the ring, generally probably based more on Randy than anybody else. They were in the Gulf Coast territory in 1976. And they get into like this legitimate shoot fight with Ted Heath and John Foley.
Wow.
And John Foley, if people don't know, was the manager in Calgary for Stampede Wrestling in the 1980s.
Right.
Very funny character, probably sober about 1 hour a day would be my guess. But he did have this reputation as being a legit shooter character back then.
A salty dog, indeed. He even once upon a time had a Hitler mustache. I've seen in pictures.
Oh my goodness! Wow,
Texas
that
Ted
takes
Heath.
some.
That was he was British. Both guys from England. Ted Heath. He would move over here, basically migrate over here and stay over here for the most part, and kind of become Americanized. He worked a lot in Amarillo, I believe. But yeah, John Foley and Ted Heath probably not guys you're just going to want to get in there and apparently random. Let's have a shoot fight tonight. Sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, right. So Scott Teal used to put out these, I guess you'd call them pamphlets or something. They were like these periodicals. He put them out every 3 or 4 months, and they were called Whatever Happened To. And he would have interviews with a lot of the old time wrestlers, and they're just really great historical references. Mm-hmm. But here is Dean Rip Tyler, who was, I think, the booker and maybe part owner of Gulf Coast at the time of that incident. So he said, I had Ted Heath and John Foley in here and was getting them over. I had the Poffos with Angelo in the main event. Foley could go, and Heath wasn't bad himself. The Poffos couldn't put their finger in their butt. I think Scott probably edited a word there, would be my guess. The Poffos went in the ring with blackjacks in their tights.
Jesus.
About the middle of the match, they started beating Heath and Foley in the head with blackjacks. Screwed my whole main event and my whole program. So when they got back to the dressing room, I went and told them, you guys get the hell out of here. They said, well, they were trying to stretch us. I slapped Randy all across the dressing room. So that was a very, very short stay in Gulf Coast.
That was an interesting story. You knew they were going to stretch you before you went out there, so you brought the black. I'm not really sure how these... Well, they were stretching it. You just carry a blackjack and your ass crack? What's going on here, man? It's a hell of a story, that's for sure. I'm sure if you go look up the results, it was a short stay, like you said, for the Poffos in the territory.
Yeah, I think there was a certain substance that's kind of related to paranoia that was popular in the 70s and 80s, but I'm not sure. This is interesting. So in the Carolinas, and this happened probably 76, 77, that time frame, Ronnie Garvin and Savage get into a fight in the Carolinas. Ronnie talked about this 3 or 4 years ago to Hannibal, and according to Ronnie, he's in a match, and they start legitimately double teaming his partner Tim Tiger Conway. They start shooting on him. So Garvin takes like a metal security stand and hits Savage with it. Garvin was the one who took the heat for that. He got fired from the territory.
Wow.
And I've heard him say when they first got together to talk about potentially working together, they were kind of looking at Ronnie and saying, well, are you going to be able to work with us? And nothing brings people together more than $1 placed in between them. And so they decided that they could work together.
I can just see Ron Garvin, though, swinging a metal stanchion. I'm out of the way of that. Holy cow.
Oh, God, yeah. Absolutely.
Well, good for him for coming to Tiger Conway's rescue, though, I guess.
That's right. He said, my partner's in trouble, I'm in trouble. He had to go for the team. So the Poffos had kind of this, reputation, of course, as being a little different in the world of wrestling.
Certainly.
In the summer of '78, they went to the Maritimes with Emile Dupree. It's been reported that Angelo had a business interest in the seasonal promotion. I don't know if that was just for that particular year. After that, Lanny goes to Portland. And then March of 1979, they do the initial tapings for ICW. And here's a quote from Rip Rogers, and I'll be quoting Rip a lot as we go through this. Angelo started the ICW territory because he wanted to work with his kids. All Angelo wanted was to be with his family. It was sink or swim, but at least they were united. And, I've heard, Cornette talk about this a lot too, that the Poffos wanted to work together. That's 3 spots. And a lot of times these small promotions had, 12, 16 full-time guys. So then you're taking up 3 with one family.
Right.
How long do you really want to do that? Rogers went on to say, we made tapes at Channel 41 WDRB in Louisville on March 13th and March 14th of 1979. Just a kind of side note, Ronnie P. Gossett was in the crowd attending those tapings up from Chattanooga. Rip has mentioned that Ronnie may have had more than just a little bit of interest in Randy Savage as a human being, but I'm not sure those feelings were reciprocated.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So Jim Cornette and talking about kind of the history of that area for wrestling. There was a strip of towns that were dark, basically across Interstate 64 from southern Illinois over into West Virginia. Phil Golden was able to get TV in Paducah, which is in western Kentucky, in 1972. Angelo Poffo wasn't being used by any of the NWA offices or the traditional offices, but he got in early with Phil Golden and was an early investor and was one of their top heels. That only lasted a year or two. Angelo started a promotion, ICW, to run some of the cities along that I-64 corridor. They used a match that Lanny had with Randy in Halifax as when he won the ICW world title. More on that. Yeah, more on that later. Yeah, world. They did incredibly low-budget television. They had a few underneath guys and wives, girlfriends, whatever, of TV station employees sitting in the crowd and used the cardboard cutting thing of people past the first row. So I don't think any of that footage from those first tapings still exists. I wasn't able to find
they did.
Yeah, 1979. And Cornette said that he had some of his tapes that he gave to Christine Jarrett for a potential lawsuit, and he never got them back. So I don't know that any of those 1979 tapes are floating around out there.
Man, wouldn't you love to see that? I mean, even that, we don't need HD to recognize that the second row is filled with cardboard cutout fans. My goodness, what was he even thinking? I mean, even Vern Gagne, in the late 80s, or when they couldn't even get people to attend the shows, he used the green screen gimmick. That was awful. But I can only imagine looking at like 7 people in the front row cheering, and then, you can visibly see behind them. And I would just love to see the quality of these cardboard cutouts. Because Randy Savage, he could make a mean poster, by God.
That's true. That's true. You had the glitter thing going.
Oh, yeah.
And some of the TV tapings, you'll see, a fairly respectable audience, and there's some interest in what's going on in the ring. And other times you will see there's 10, 15 people who look like they'd rather be in jail than watching what's in front of them.
It almost feels like sometimes they just slap together. They wake up and go, you know what? Let's go do a TV taping right now. Right now? Okay, let's do it. It's like,
yeah.
There's no fans.
Exactly.
It's kind of crazy.
It is crazy. I'm going to read some of this column from Eric Westlin, who wrote this years ago. I think it was for the old Kayfabe Memories website. Mm-hmm. And it's talking about the origins of ICW. And he says, well, from what I can determine from the ads, April of 1979 were some of the first cards promoted. They were jointly run with wrestler promoter Dale Mann, an associate of the Poffos who'd also wrestled for Nick Goulas in 1978, but resided in Kentucky. We'll talk about Dale Mann some more later. Just how Angelo decided to base, just how Angelo decided to base his group out of Lexington, I'm not sure. According to the information provided from a wrestler who worked from the Poffos during this era, he was looking for areas where he could get maximum television exposure with a decent population base, which had not been saturated from other promotions. Around Lexington, the action was based in Georgetown at the Horse Park Inn. They took over the Sunday night slot from a group of wrestlers who had been performing there regularly. The Poffos' grandstanding challenges to the prior promotion wrestlers was also a fixture of the newspaper ads featuring the Poffos' new wrestling group. So I thought this was really interesting. We've heard forever about these, grandstanding challenges
yes.
that they did against the Foolers and against Lawler. But this actually started in Georgetown, Kentucky, this town of probably like 15,000 people or so.
Got to work your way up, man.
Yeah, there's probably, a couple hundred people maybe coming to a wrestling show. So Angelo put up $20,000 against a donut that his men, Randy Savage and Rip Rogers, would beat the other promotions tag team of Danny Fargo and Bulldog Cliff Lilly. My goodness. This attempt to garner press and attention was a constant theme of the ICW over the first couple of years. And as we mentioned, it'd be repeated against Jarrett and Fuller. And we'll talk about some of that later.
Yeah.
Some of the talent that they started off with, Rip Rogers, Dale Mann, Lanny. Debbie Combs was there from the beginning. Our mother, Cora, would often wrestle Debbie under a mask, wrestling as Lady Satan. Some of the other guys that filled out these early cards, Joe Cagle, Mike Dupree, wrote a lot on message boards over the years about wrestling history. Stoney Williams, Rocky Lee, Don Starr, Chuck Connors, and then they would fill it out with masked men who were, probably guys who were doing double shots and things of that nature.
Lots of masked men.
Lots of masked men, lots of women matches, lots of little people matches, as we'd say these days, filling up the card. Going back to Eric's notes, one interesting feud showcased in the April matches involves a name most of you would not associate with ICW. Mr. Wrestling lost a mask versus mascot with the Miser in one of the first cards at Georgetown and was unmasked as Don Starr. Starr, of course, demanded rematches to regain his honor from his unmasking. Don Starr eventually would go on to wrestle in other national promotions and claim Lexington, Kentucky as his hometown, and his real name was Eric Embry. That kind of shocked me when I was informed of this relationship. So
that was new to me.
Yeah, a young Eric Embry working for ICW. Okay, and this is about the Heavyweight Championship, which they first called the International Heavyweight Championship, and then it would morph into the World Heavyweight Championship. If you look up the internet and things like that, it'll say Randy beat Lanny for the title in Nova Scotia on March 13th. The ads shown from the first shows of ICW still show Lanny as the heavyweight belt holder. His first featured bouts defending the strap are against Rip Rogers, and it appears that the transition to Randy occurred in mid-July of 79. While I did not personally witness the bout that caused this title change, it was shown on the 1-hour TV show, and the match went nearly the full show. So Randy wasn't always the champion. Lanny was the champion first. And there are some people who claim the match was in the Maritimes. There's also like an internet thing that says they want a match in San Francisco, of all places, to become the IC. I don't know why
Rio de Janeiro at that point.
Rio de Janeiro. Let's go to Rio.
They had another big tournament in 79, I was told.
Yes, absolutely. All right. One interesting story also related to me about these early adventures of the Poffo promotion. According to my source, when Angelo devised his plan to start his upstart group, he lacked an essential ingredient, a wrestling ring. Supposedly, Angelo volunteered his truck to haul Dale Mann's ring, who he's working with, from that night's show to the matches tomorrow. The next morning, Angelo and the boys had someone measure all the component parts of the ring and diagram plans for this individual to build one just like it for them. So Dale actually unknowingly contributed to his competitor's entrance into the wrestling marketplace through his gesture to let Angelo bring the ring to his next show. So
sounds like
Angelo did Dale Mann a favor there, and there you go.
I'll do you a solid, and in the meantime, I'll kind of figure out how to build this thing myself. And the rest, as they say, is history from there. They kind of start into the ICW. Now he's got a ring. Now they've got maybe some TV put together. Anyway, I don't know if it's airing at that point. Initially with, like you said, those original episodes they put together back in March. But as things go on, we're going to talk about, obviously, they're going to get involved with some of the Knoxville boys and things. So curious to see where we go next. Okay.
George Weingroff has said the first ICW card was in Salyersville, Kentucky. I'm probably not saying that right. Salyersville, Salyersville, Kentucky.
Who knows how it's pronounced?
Yeah. And he said there were only 4 people on the card: George, himself, Angelo, Lanny, and Randy.
Wow.
I could not find that show. The first documented show I found was April 2nd in Elizabethtown, Kentucky. So it had Angelo, the Miser, and working as the Miser, Lanny, Randy Savage, Eric Embry as Mr. Wrestling, Rip Rogers, and Dale Mann. Those were the main people on the card. And again, other people we would see, in some of these early cards we've mentioned, George Weindroff, Joe Cagle, Debbie Combs, Cora Combs, etc. And then we think of Rip as always being part of ICW, but this was actually the time frame he went to Portland for several months. Mm-hmm. So they're trying to get ICW off the ground, but they're not really running full time yet. So Rip goes and he's working with people like Roddy Piper and Adrian Adonis and all the homesteaders up in Portland, Buddy Rose and those people. And he talks very, very fondly about that time in his career that, he got to be kind of a main event heel, semi-main event heel, learning how to call matches and things of that nature. So that was a good experience for him. And then I thought this was interesting. On April 13th, so one of their very early cards, they're in Leachfield, Kentucky, and the Freebirds are there. Billed as the NWA Tag Team Champions, wrestling Robert Gibson and Mexican Angel.
Wow.
And as we go through this, we'll see that during that first year, there were a lot of Gulas guys that would make shots, I guess, when they didn't have work for Gulas, obviously. Yeah. Yeah. And they would come in and work a town for the Poffos, which was interesting.
We talked about how bad the money was there by that point for Gulas, so it makes sense, especially if they're not running every night anymore, for these guys that are already passing through anyway to take a shot and make a booking. And that's just caught me off guard though. The Freebirds coming through there, so even Michael Hayes and Terry Gordy play a small part in the ICW, and against Robert Gibson and the Mexican Angel. So yeah, everybody there. It checks out. They're coming from Gulas. They're working a match here for the ICW show, but that's a hell of a main event. Nobody's main event over Randy, but it's a hell of a match to throw on your show there just randomly in Leachfield.
Yeah, a special attraction match. Yeah, and of course I don't know, what TV markets we're seeing the Gulas TV. So if people were familiar with them off TV or not, who knows at that time, but. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't it be cool to see, those guys in a high school gym in 1979? The best thing that could have possibly happened for the Poffos happened in June of 1979, and that's the split in Knoxville. Because I can't see this promotion lasting 6 months otherwise. I mean, I
can't believe it lasts 6 weeks, to be honest with you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. In these very tiny Kentucky towns, obviously nobody's making a living doing this at that time. But then, as you had discussed extensively with Bob Roop, the split in Knoxville happens, and all that talent opens up to them. And I don't know what the initial connection was between the Poffos. I don't know if, Boris Malenko reached out, or Ron Wright. Not sure how that happened. But they start working with that group pretty much immediately.
Yeah.
When All Star gets off the ground. And so some of the all-star crew, the people that split off, we've got Malenko, Bob Roop, Bob Orton Jr., Ronnie Garvin, and then they would have shows with people like Rick Connors, Tony Peters, Roger Smith, who would work as the assassin, Terry Gibbs, Hoot Gibson. Those people would kind of fill out the cards.
Yeah, Terry Gibbs actually jumped with those guys. He's never really credited for doing it, I guess, because he wasn't on their level as far as where they were pushed on the card, but Gibbs left Fuller with the rest of those. I think Roger Smith did too, under a hood.
Yeah, and I think that they were running this angle where Ronnie Garvin was kind of being the mentor to Terry Gibbs, and I think that carried over. I think they did that in Knoxville, and I think they did that kind of in ICW a little bit as well. So there probably was some sort of like personal friendship, personal relationship there, I would guess. And speaking, the Hoot Gibson, which the name has always cracked me up, and it became, the nickname for
Robert,
for our friend from the Rock and Roll Express.
Right.
So Hoot Gibson was Ronnie Garvin's buddy and owned a local hardware store. He was Garvin's neighbor.
That explains.
And you see this guy, and I mean, he tried.
They gave him a cowboy hat, named after, I think, an old-timey Western actor or something like that, Hoot Gibson. And, I mean, there's a tape out there. It used to be, I purchased it many decades ago now. My first look at the ICW was, I don't know, it was like a mixture of Memphis and ICW and whatever. I can't even remember what the tape was called, but one of the matches on there was, I think it was a tag match, but I know Ron Garvin was in the match, and so was Hoot Gibson. So that was my first look at Hoot.
Yeah. Ryan said, I'll carry the workload tonight. What the hell? June 22nd, Gypsy Joe appeared in Litchfield again. One of these Goulas guys showing up. They did a lot of shows that year in Owensboro, Kentucky, which had been a Jarrett town for a long time, throughout the 70s. And they did the challenge thing there, $1,000 versus a donut. If Lawler shows up, he gets $1,000, etc. And also, this is about the time frame you start seeing Bob Orton Jr. He appears in Owensboro, and you'll start seeing all the all-star people start appearing in ICW pretty quickly here. It doesn't take long.
It's almost instantaneous. It's within a couple of weeks, it feels like, anyway.
Yeah. And somewhere around late July, early August, they get those rings built, and they split off from Dale Mann. He's not active in the promotion anymore. Lanny said, in the early days of the promotion, we were using Dale Mann's ring. Eventually, my brother and him did not get along. We built 3 rings and got our own ring truck. I did hear a man killed his own referee and got away with it.
Wow. Yeah,
and Lanny,
you Google Dale Mann's name, man, and there's some stories out there, that's for sure.
Yeah. Lanny, he had a podcast for, I don't know, he did about 20 episodes. He didn't do it too long. And one of them, he's interviewing this guy from Kentucky who knew Dale Mann and asking him about the murders. And he's saying, yeah, Mann got all the boys to go up on the stand and say it was in self-defense, and that he got off on killing the referee. And
wow.
There's I don't know his total death tally, but I think it was more than one from what I 79 August, Walter Johnson, the former pro football player, made his first appearance in ICW. He would work regularly for them later. Pez Watley, starts appearing regularly for them. Steve Cooper didn't appear a lot, but I'm imagining he probably worked under a mask quite a bit during that time frame. Mm-hmm. You got the Cuban Assassin. You got Roger Smith, which we mentioned, the Assassin. Mighty Cupid and Wee Willie filling out the cards, the little people. And you got the all-star guys regularly coming in.
There's a lot of pictures out there with Lanny Poffo and Wee Willie hanging out. I'm just saying. I'm just putting that out
there. Yeah. It's a little disturbing, isn't it? It's a little disturbing. Boris Malenko showed up in September on some ICW cards. He would not work there very long.
Right.
Doug Vines, who became a regular, he starts in September. Barry O joined his brother Bob Orton Jr. in ICW. Barry just always seemed, I don't know, he seemed like a goth kid before we knew what goth was. He just seemed like a depressed man.
I could go with that.
Bearcat Brown appeared on a number of shows. So anyway, we go back to Owensboro in September. They're doing the special challenges against Bill Dundee, Bob Roop, and Savage. Roop has won $75,000 in cash if Bill Dundee shows up, bring a turkey. Randy Savage brings $75,000 in cash versus Jerry Lawler, bring a chicken and defeat Savage for the $7,500. And they just never stopped doing that.
No,
and,
it was a constant.
Yeah.
Relive the glory days of Memphis wrestling with the Retro Wrestling Review USWA podcast. Each week, we go back in time to review USWA Championship Wrestling from the 1990s, episode by episode. Join us for watch-alongs, behind-the-scenes stories, and exclusive interviews with people who were there and lived it. Whether you grew up watching it or you're discovering it for the first time, this podcast is your ringside seat to Memphis wrestling history. It's all a part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Listen now at USWApodcast.com.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here, curator of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, inviting you guys to listen to many of the programs here as part of the WrestleCopia brand, including, but not limited to, the Wrestling Memory Grenade, currently covering the 1988 and the WWF project. You can also listen to the Regional Rasslin podcast, where we talk the territories. You can also listen to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. But that's not all. You can also check out the Pro Wrestling Academy with the professor of Puroresu, Mr. Dan Ginnity. Dan and I go back in time and cover the history of Japanese professional wrestling in the English language. And you can listen to all of those shows and more, all part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, located over at WrestleCopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, and anywhere your podcast streaming needs are met. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to our social media guys for all the latest goings on here at the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Plus, I'm constantly adding old school video clips and pictures from throughout wrestling history. You can follow us over on X, formerly Twitter, at Rasslin Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com/Rasslin Grenade. And why not subscribe to YouTube.com/Rasslin Grenade. And of course, now would be a fantastic time to become a WrestleCopia patron over at Patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, Patreon.com/WrestleCopia, where you get so many gifts, including all of my insanely detailed show notes for every episode of The Grenade Show, Regional Rasslin, and the Monday Warfare podcast. You'll also get early access to a lot of the podcasts here on the WrestleCopia brand, where you can listen days and sometimes as much as a week earlier than the rest of the listeners. But that's still not all, guys. You also get at least a dozen digital downloads for your viewing and reading pleasure each and every month, plus random bonus video drops, and of course, the Patreon exclusive watch-along series covering mini past WWF and WCW events. And if that's not all, videocasts, also now a part of Patreon. No subscription, cancel anytime. Give it a try for a month, guys. I think you'll like the content that I offer, and every penny of it goes right back here into paying the bills. So if you're looking to support that next up-and-coming podcast brand, please consider making it WrestleCopia. Help me pay some of the bills to keep the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and all of the great shows here up and running for the months and the years to come.
This is Wrestling Nostalgia, the podcast that dives into wrestling history. Hey, wrestling fans, I'm Dave Dynasty, and if you enjoy podcasts that are knowledgeable and history-driven, then Wrestling Nostalgia is for you. With great guests and fun interviews, there are over 200 episodes in our archives. We chat with several first-time guests and often cover topics not discussed on other podcasts. Look up Wrestling Nostalgia on your favorite podcast platform and visit all of our links at linktree/WrestlePod. That is linktr.ee/RASSLEPOD. And remember, wherever you go, whatever you do, be good, be safe, and keep on growing.
ICW in September, they were in Springfield, Tennessee, which was like 40 miles north of Nashville. So they're going into Goulas territory at that time. You don't really think of it as challenging Goulas, but Goulas was still active at that time.
Right.
And the All-Star shows start bouncing around. They're not doing great in All-Star. It moves to a high school, and then it later moved to something called WNOX Auditorium.
Right.
And we'll talk about that more a little later. And by October, they're doing their first West Virginia show. They're in Fairmount. And they also start doing split crews. I mean, they would really just put two name guys on a show and then just fill it with undercard and gimmicks and, do that in different towns and different weekends, probably just experimenting to see what was going to work and what wasn't going to work. Rick McCord, who would be there for a long time, arrived in October. I thought this was interesting. Some of the cards would say ICW on one side of it, and then it would say NWA on the other, like they were the NWA, which they clearly weren't. I just thought, well, that's humorous. That's interesting.
Well, it is interesting, especially what's to come here with the NWA and Angelo anyway.
Yeah. November and December, through some connections, some of the All-Star guys made some shots in Puerto Rico, which I thought was interesting. And then they did a show in Gallatin, Tennessee in December, and Rip was not billed as Rip Rogers. He was billed as the Disco Kid. So I'm guessing that was close enough to Nashville that people remembered that gimmick. But basically, they did not run any major cities at all in 1979 outside of, if you consider Knoxville, which was really the All-Star Wrestling. They're running all these small towns. I'm not going to list them all, but
I did find it interesting. They were putting $30,000 up against Bulldog Cliff Lilly, but when it came to Jimmy Golden and Ron Fuller and things of that nature, all of a sudden it was $5,000, $7,500. Like, there's a slight chance these guys might show up, and if we have to give them any money for any reason, it's not gonna be 30 grand at least.
It was very fluid. Yeah, it was $100,000 later against like Jarrett.
I like that. That's fun. That's realistic.
Yeah, Jarrett, Tojo, and Lawler, I think, something like that. So anyway, a lot of small towns in Kentucky. They made the first shot in West Virginia. They made a shot in Cannleton, Indiana. They were running Elizabethtown, Georgetown, and Owensboro on a weekly basis in 1979. And I think they would eventually venture off and not run those towns. But Herb Weingroff, who's the brother of George, said George was the wrestling coach at the Cheatham County High School in 1979. George ran a fundraiser for the wrestling team, and he had Randy Savage on the card. We had Randy in downtown Ashland City, Tennessee, and he helped in selling Krispy Kreme donuts for the team. After the school year, George decided to wrestle professionally full-time with ICW. And one thing that a lot of people may not know is that George was also one of the minority owners of the promotion. And I don't know
46 other people.
Right, exactly. Everybody in town had shares of the promotion.
Well, I'll tell you what, man, with Angelo Poffo holding your money, at least you know it's still there. I mean, whether he gives it back to you or not, at least you know it's not being spent, right?
That's true. That's true. One of the gimmicks they used a lot in the first year, I mean, probably every town they went to, was Ginger the Wrestling Bear, who would take on, quote, all comers. And so I guess it's a deal where you would have to show up and sign a waiver. And Rip talked about this. The bear man we used was named Rick Tyler, and he was from Georgia. We'd have the, quote, Pikeville Bear Wrestling Champion. You'd give him a $10 trophy and give him an interview on TV. Using the bear was the greatest thing we ever did. Whoever got the most applause would win. You would bring your 99 cousins and 99 relatives, but they all bought a ticket to get in.
Wow.
That was a hell of a gimmick.
That is a hell of a carny gimmick right there. I'm fighting a bear. You can bring everybody you want on down to watch you. I will do that, but they got to pay their way in, obviously. And wow, that's amazing.
And sometimes the winner may have been kind of predetermined, shockingly enough.
Yeah, sure.
There was an article from the Paducah paper in early 1980 about Ginger the Wrestling Bear and Rip Tyler's being interviewed. And he said, there's always somebody to wrestle her. I think they're pretty dumb to do it. People are funny and will try anything to win a trophy. And the winner that night was named C. Edwards, as in most likely Crybaby Edwards or George Hill, who was working for the ICW office at the time. So I'm thinking they thought, well, hey, we can't pay $10 for this trophy and give it away here tonight.
No, we got to buy another trophy.
So that was pretty hysterical. He identified himself as, like, I don't know, a truck driver or a construction worker or something of that nature. But just C. Edwards cracked me up.
I love it.
Here are some of the strange names that I saw on ICW cards in 1979, and most of these were one-timers. Coco Ware made a shot for them. Lynn Rossi and Joey Rossi. Nick Busick, which really shocked me. I didn't know Nick was wrestling that early. He had actually started in like 1977. So he had been wrestling for, I think, 14 years before he went to the WWE for 20 minutes.
Yeah, that's about how long it was. Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah,
I love the character, Big Bully.
Yeah, Steve Cooper, we mentioned. Tojo made a shot for them, which is funny because Tojo would come up in these challenges later.
Yeah,
Gypsy Joe, Darn Fargo, Bearcat Brown, who wrestled a lot, and Mexican Angel. So, like I say, a lot of these ghoulless guys, we mentioned the Freebirds earlier, would come in for a night and make enough money for gas and food, I guess.
Yeah, well, Coco had just been trained, so he probably was looking for a little extra work. Len and Joey Rossi were probably asked to leave after they wrestled, or at least, well, the younger one anyway. And then Nick Busick out of Weirton, West Virginia or something like that. So I'm assuming that, it was close enough of a drive to try to get his feet wet in another wrestling promotion of sorts. But it's just kind of, like you said, some interesting names.
I actually found out when Coco Ware started working yesterday, and I'd never known this. And it was way back to 1974. And he was like 15 or 16 years old. And Plowboy Frazier had the outlaw promotion in Union City, which is where Coco was from. And he went and said, I want to be a wrestler. And they said, well, here's a waiver. Have your parents sign it. And Coco just took the waiver and signed it himself.
Sure.
So he actually started wrestling.
You think about how small Coco was when he broke in. I mean, height-wise, yes, but I mean, even just how thin he was when he broke in. Imagine what he looked like at 15, and maybe put him in there with the Plowboy. That would have been really funny looking. Yeah, and he was one of those guys that was a real regular in the Henry Rogers cards in Malden, Missouri for a couple of years. Yeah. I think he was Coco Kid or something of that nature. I'm not positive. One of the more humorous things that happened in 1979, early in the year, it's before the promotion got off the ground, there was an article in the Nashville Banner, and I don't know what kind of newspaper the Nashville Banner was. It doesn't sound like the Tennessean or the lead newspaper for the city. And if you count the number of typos in the column, you would think it's probably not the premier newspaper in the city. but Lanny recorded a song called "The Policeman Is Your Friend." Wow. Written and arranged by Leapin' Lanny. And Lanny narrates the song, and a guy named Johnny V gets credit for, quote, singing on this song. And it's just available on YouTube if you want to torture yourself for a couple of minutes. Go do that. I will be doing that later today, I'll have you know.
Yeah. But Lanny, here's one of the most ironic sentences I've read in years. Talking about, himself and what he wants to do in the country music industry. I can talk good. Okay.
Great way to start off.
Yeah, let's rethink that sentence. I have a good, strong voice like Lauren Green.
Jesus, man.
So for people under the age of 60 who don't know who Lauren Green is, right, we're going back to Bonanza.
Ben Cartwright, man. Come on, people.
Ben Cartwright. And he had a number one pop single in 1964. It was titled Ringo. It had nothing to do with Ringo Starr. It's just this awful spoken word thing about some outlaw that he had found in terrible condition. And then later the outlaw saved the sheriff who had found him and helped him. It just awful stuff.
I have a problem with Lanny Poffo comparing himself to the father of the Cartwrights there on the Ponderosa. That's really upsetting.
Yeah, that's a stretch. But he had reportedly performed at Fair and Young's Celebrity Ballroom in Nashville. And there's another great wrestling tie to Fair and Young. His last drummer for his touring band was a guy named Mark Gouline. Oh, so anybody interested in Memphis wrestling, go look up the House of Gouline and have a few laughs.
There you go.
Lanny said, I'll continue to write because someday soon I'll be in the music business full time.
Oh, my. Well, he's in the right neighborhood, Nashville, and things of that nature.
Yeah, he tried. There's a B-side, too, that I can't remember the title, but just imagine, like, something worse than the A-side.
Maybe he'll do a little better with some poetry. I don't know.
That's right. Here were the guys who were in most of the main events in 1979. I looked at both ICW and All Star since they were merged in a lot of ways. Savage had the most, surprisingly. Then Leapin' Lanny. It's shocking. Go figure. Savage had 57 main events that I could find. Lanny had like 45. I'm sure there were more out there. Ronnie Garvin, 28. Then we go to Bob Orton Jr., who was feuding with Garvin a lot that year. He had 19. The Miser had 18. We drop off to Rip Rogers, 14. George Weingroff, 11. Bob Roop, 9. Boris Malenko, 8. And it goes down from there. So
do the names. Dale Mann next to him.
Yeah. So Angelo was taking good care of his sons in the main events there. So on the Knoxville end, All-Star would go through several months early into 1980, but Fuller pulled out at the end of the year. He was so disgusted with the guys that split off from him and the court cases, and he did not do well in the court cases. He actually told the truth in court, which killed him.
Yeah.
And here's a kind of a longish post from when Izzy Slapowitz, who's passed several years ago now, but he was active on the message board at one time. And he's talking about what happened to Fuller's promotion and in Knoxville as well. And he said, what had been an unbelievable hotbed of professional wrestling became as cold as ice, but it was caused less by burnout and more by bad timing and bad business decisions. Fuller, who had up until the war had been running arguably one of the most successful promotions in the country, saw his houses starting to dwindle and decided to pull out at about the same time All-Star ran out of the limited funding they had to begin with. As wrestling, as with any new business venture, there has to be enough capital to invest and build, which is something All-Star didn't have. All-Star lost their TV just the week before I arrived, and when we got TV again, it was airing around midnight on a public television station with a very weak signal. Without good TV, it didn't matter how good our talent was or our angles, the house show numbers began to fall fast. We had a good venue at WNOX Auditorium, but we lost that when some of the fans got so hot, they started to destroy the place. And he kind of references that he did something to kind of cause a riot there. We had to find other venues, ending up in Evans Collins Field, a small outdoor venue. After a while, the money ran out, Fuller was gone, and Knoxville was dead for pro wrestling. Angelo, who had been sharing talent and working closely with, wanted most of us to work with for him. So he offered the partners of All-Star points in his Kentucky promotion, and that's how we ended up in Kentucky. So a little bit of that TV for All-Star in 1979 is out there. Yeah. If anybody wants to look that up, you can just search All-Star Wrestling Knoxville 1979 on YouTube. Big Jim Hess is doing the announcing. If you can suffer through that. Mm-hmm. It kind of looks like it was shot in the cave based on the lighting of the ring and everything, and the crowd and everything. Yeah. But you get to see Lanny Poffo winning a match over George McCreary with a sleeper. Savage beat Rick McCord with a suplex. The Assassin used a belly-to-belly suplex against Jim Pride. I was so impressed to see a belly-belly suplex in 1979.
Roger Smith was always surprising for his size, doing slingshot splashes into the ring and things of that nature. So. That was pretty cool. And teaming with Colonel Yankee, who was Yasu Fuji, and Bob Roop had known Yasu from San Francisco. So actually, I guess he would have had to make a call, or maybe Fuji was looking for some work. So that's how he kind of randomly winds up here with all these Knoxville guys and all these ICW guys, because that was kind of a head scratcher until we covered that on the Wrestling Stoop show. I was like, how did he get there? And I kind of put two and two together as I was asking Bob, because I remembered back to, I was like, wait a minute, wasn't he in San Francisco with you? But that's kind of how he winds up here and gets the gimmick, Colonel Yankee. Get it, guys? They're in the South.
Woo! Yeah. So, yeah, Tom Heggie is working there as Jim Pride. We've mentioned the name Jim Pride earlier.
Right there, give it back to you.
Yeah, there you go. Hoot Gibson was there. Just the usual names that we've seen. But it is interesting to see those guys, you know, especially Lanny.
Yeah, when that footage came out, man, that was like, wow, it blew my mind. Like, holy shit, you know, you'd only heard about it up until that point. I had never seen anything until it just randomly popped up on YouTube as the first time I saw it.
Yeah. So after the Poffos get their promotion established and off the ground and get the partnership with All-Star, one of the first things that they do is they filed a suit in Lexington, Kentucky, alleging antitrust violations against members of the NWA. So here's the names of the people that they decided to sue for antitrust violations for monopolizing the wrestling business. Nick Goulas, George Goulas, Tom Ernesto, Jerry Jarrett, Jerry Lawler, Buddy Fuller, Eddie Graham, Jim Barnett, Ed Farhat, Wilbur Snyder, Richard Afflis, Dick the Bruiser, Vern Gagne, and Bob Geigel. So they're just randomly suing all these guys for absolutely no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, the list is insane if you guys go and get the Pro Wrestling in the Law book, because there's people that are just like second cousins to someone who's getting in this lawsuit. I mean, there's promoters, there's bookers. I think there's a couple of people that had died by the point they filed this lawsuit. I mean, it was insane, the list of people they put in. They sued everybody in the wrestling business and their families.
Right. And that suit actually stayed alive until 1982, and the court finally threw out the case. They didn't have jurisdiction over the defendants. And, you know, George Goulas is like saying, you know, I'm having trouble promoting cities in Kentucky myself. How am I involved in this in any way? And or Nick Goulas was saying that. The funny thing in the book is Ed Farhat being deposed for the lawsuit, and the attorney is trying to get him to break kayfabe. And all Ed Farhat wants to do, and he's got no lawyer representing him, he just wants to rant and rave about Jim Barnett. Of course, Barnett had taken over a lot of the old towns that went dark with in Ohio and Michigan. And eventually he walked out of the hearing, but it's so comical reading that text. So
the Sheik.
Yeah. So I'm not sure what Angelo thought. Maybe he thought these people would just settle with him and give him some money. I mean, there was just no basis to that lawsuit whatsoever. But it's wrestling, so what do you do?
Got to give it a try. I mean, it worked with a lot of guys in Ted Turner.
That's true. He was ahead of his time. All right, so we're going to talk about the legendary thriftiness of the Poffo family here. We've got a lot of different perspectives, some positive, some not so positive. But we'll start with Lanny, who always, passionately defended his family. My father denied himself material things so we as a family could live better. And he's mentioned things like, they had their own batting cage, they had a pool, they were in Downers Grove, Illinois, and everybody was jealous of them for this great life that they had. And Rip gives some perspective, Rip Rogers. Angelo was born in 1925, so he grew up in the Great Depression. They had no running water, no electricity. He was an only child. The family spoke Italian. He was determined that he was going to provide. He was determined that his family wouldn't have financial stress. He was a hell of a father. He was a hell of a husband. So Rip, in some way, saying, "Oh, Angelo's a role model. We should all be like this, and how we manage our life." Bob Roop, Lanny and Randy would try to get free rooms from guys who were already leaving or sleep in their car or trunk. They were making money. It wasn't like they were broke. There's one thing about being frugal, and there's another thing about being so fucking tight that you won't spend a nickel. And I actually heard another wrestler recently talking about when Lanny was in the WWF, or Randy sleeping in his car because he didn't want to pay for a hotel room.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, the guy's making hundreds of thousands of dollars at that point. And he doesn't want to spend $60 for a hotel. Rip Rogers talking about hotels. The record we had was 16 people in one hotel room in Southern Illinois.
Damn.
So one person goes in and rents the hotel room, and then 15 guys sneak
it's like
in.
A clown car. Fucking clown hotel room.
Can you imagine it? I can't even imagine we're 16 bodies physically.
When I read that in your notes, I was trying to do that myself. Like I've went out, as a young guy, 2021, and we went and did things out of state, and we crammed, a few guys in the room together, but man, never close to 16. So that's insane.
Okay. And George Weingroff talked about Angelo a little bit, and also in how it impacted the business side of things as well.
Yeah.
Angelo was so cheap it killed us. We'd film Thursday mornings at 8 a.m. Kids are at school. People are working. Nobody is in the audience, but it saved money. Angelo didn't understand how empty it looked. We would do these other 6 a.m. tapings on Tuesday mornings. He's talking about doing the promos, local promos on Tuesdays. Angelo would bring a stopwatch to time the crew on their breaks to make sure they weren't wasting time. These were guys he should have brought whiskey to for working for us. Instead, he pissed off all the guys who were helping us.
Wow.
So, and
essentially, these were probably a lot of guys that were volunteering or just helping out, it sounds like. And it's like, hey, throw them a bone here. And Angelo, no, that's okay. And we're going to do it at 6 a.m., which is, maybe it's cheaper to record at that time of day as well. I'm going to have to imagine. I don't really know. But yeah, that's kind of crazy when you think about it. I guess 8 a.m. on a Thursday morning would be cheaper than doing something on a Saturday, but there's nobody home, especially in those days. There was no internet to sit here and work online at home from, right? So it's like, yeah, everybody is. Who was in that crowd? Oh, it was cardboard cutouts. Okay.
The first time I met Ronnie Garvin, well, I've only met Ronnie Garvin once. So I met Ronnie Garvin at a wrestling convention years ago. And of course, I always went to talk ICW with those people. And he's like, yeah, I was working for myself. I'm part owner. I'm making money. But Angelo just pissed off everybody.
Yeah, that's the general consensus I get from Bob as well in regards to just Angelo was a different kind of cat, man.
Yeah. Rip Rogers, Randy and I would go into a restaurant. We'd order a tea or water. Then we'd eat the scraps that other people left behind.
Oh my God.
This is a very recent quote from Eric Embry. He just did an interview about a month ago, and he was asked about the Poffos. Randy was definitely a hothead back in his younger days. He could go off at the drop of the hat. When Daddy Angelo gave him that eye, he calmed the fuck down, too. I rode with him to some shows when I was working for Nick Goulas. All of them are making top money in the territory. They ain't hurting. But I watched them so many times, they'd plan out. Angelo would say, Lanny, you get the meat. Randy, you get the bread. I'll get the mayonnaise. They'd go in and steal it. Not just once, every time I rode with them.
Wow.
So Eric's thinking, I'm going to go to jail because I'm with these guys.
It's like cockroaches spreading across the store. You can't keep an eye on all of them back then, right? So.
That's right. Yeah, the security was not too sophisticated during that
Lanny,
time.
you're getting the protein, buddy. You're in charge of the big one right there. So you better extra pockets for Lanny Poffo.
Yeah.
And we've heard the stories about Randy Savage and the steak and things of that nature as well.
Yeah, that will definitely come up later. Izzy, for most of the trips, most of the guys got in the back of the ring truck. For hours, they rode like that. Miser used to give us all sorts of hell for driving and calling us prima donnas. The trips became so unbearable and the payoffs were so low that people started saying, hey, what are we doing here? So most of the guys couldn't even afford gas money. They're just like, okay, I'll just sit in the back of the ring truck for 400 miles while we go to Podunk, Illinois or wherever.
Yeah.
Bob Roop again, Angelo, he was so tight he would never even give you a smile. Unless he stole some money from you, then he'd smile.
There you go. That makes sense.
A Cornette one, Angelo would limit the time he washed his clothes because he didn't want the detergent to break down the fibers. It would cause the clothes to wear out quicker.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. And one of my favorites from Ronnie Garvin, every day I'd hear, it's better to be rich and dead than poor and alive. Every day.
These are guys who truly paid their dues. Sadly, Ronnie Garvin had already done it all, been in the business for quite a long time at this point, at least a decade or longer. And now he's dealing with this. Of course, he's part owner at this point, so he's making a few bucks off of whatever the hell they're making there. And apparently enough to keep Ronnie alive and happy enough to keep doing it. Well, I won't say happy, but he continues to do it for a while here. But man, it's rough, and it takes me back to the episodes I did with Bob, just the stories about how tight, the family was. And it started with Angelo, but, it trickled down, obviously, with these guys sleeping in their cars and whatnot. Just insane stories from beginning to end with that family. And I thought it was funny that Eric Embry said, in his younger days, Randy Savage could be a hothead. And from the stories I've heard, that was his entire life. It seemed like.
Yeah, as opposed to the calm, serene Randy that we got later on. But I was thinking about Ronnie. Ronnie kind of lived on both sides of the fence in the ICW promotion from looking at it from my perspective, because he was a part owner, and I think early on they had kind of a booking committee, and he would be part of that, and he would give some ideas on booking. But I don't think he wasn't involved in all the day-to-day operations like Rip was, and we'll talk about how some of those operations went later. But Rip and Randy and Lanny and George, they all had these like regular responsibilities. And Ronnie was kind of like, I've got one foot in being one of the boys and one foot in being an owner here. So he was kind of on both sides of the fence. But I don't think he ever had any great love or trust for the Poffos. I think it was just a pure business arrangement.
Right. I don't know that anybody really did, but it's amazing how some of these guys stayed for years. They're in the ICW territory. I know, like Roop and Orton, they got out when the getting was good finally, and Ronnie it would take much longer to get out and go to Georgia. But yeah, you see some names and you kind of look at what's going on there, on screen, and it just feels like some of these guys are out of place. Not just what they did in the past, but just their performance and where they're at. Of course, Randy Savage is coming up in all this as well. But I just look at Bob Orton's going to go on to be, the bodyguard of Roddy Piper Daddy, WrestleMania and all that stuff. And Ron Garvin gets the NWA world title where, works with Ric Flair there in 87. So, and Bob Roop, he's going to go to Mid-South, get the North American title, blah, 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 and work Georgia and everything after that. It's crazy that these guys, I know they got blackballed out of Knoxville, the NWA, yada, yada. And it took a little time to get back to where, they had been. But man, it was a hell of a happenstance, a happy coincidence that the Knoxville thing happens, like you said, man, when ICW is basically starting. And so even though they don't merge immediately, they wait until they're both kind of floundering together, but they're working together. The talent is crossing over.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I had this college professor once who said, when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, one of the people cheering the most was Winston Churchill because the U.S. finally had to get in the war. And it's kind of like, oh, well, we've got this little dinky promotion. We're doing nothing towns. And then all of a sudden, all this talent just opens up to us. And, they weren't able to make Knoxville a success.
Right.
And basically, we can run for years with these guys, which they do, but at a very low level, at a shoestring budget level. Yeah.
There was enough talent there to make it work. So you have to wonder, was it really the frugalness that cost them at the end of the day? Could they have made some other decisions to kind of, boost the I want to say ratings, but boost anything, I guess, in the company at this point? I mean, we got so much more to talk about, so I don't want to get into everything here this week, but that's a hell of a way to get things going, talking about how the inception, everything going on in 79, of course, the Knoxville fallout, the crossover with All-Star, all that good stuff. And I love the thriftiness stories. I'm sure more will come. Maybe, somebody listening to this is going to send us a couple more that they found or they lived themselves. One of the workers of the time. I'd love to, we certainly welcome that here for the program. Hopefully I'm going to have a Dale Mann story or two to throw in here, because I just feel like this is the only time we're going to talk about Dale Mann, at least in some form where it's relevant. I could do a whole show on, the stories of these outlaw promotions of the time, but yeah, Dale is an interesting character, and I've seen some stories. You talked about alleged murders he may have committed, and I use that, I'm going to throw alleged in there because I don't know what family members he has still kicking around. So, but that'll do it, man, this week. Man, what a fun little first ride. We kind of look at the inception. We see the full circle of some of the names from the Jim Pride to the Graduate thing, and like I said, they're so thrifty, they're even recycling their gimmicks with each other. And Lanny's going to use that cap and gown later on again in the WWF. So
yeah, we will definitely see a lot of very low budget gimmicks used as we go through this journey with ICW. But I mean, it's just going to be such a fun ride, and I'm just so looking forward to telling these stories. And we certainly welcome feedback from all quarters. Please, anybody, hey, if I got something wrong, I got something incomplete, like I say, I'm just a guy pulling information from a lot of different sources, trying to paint a picture. And if the picture's not complete, let us know, and we'll do what we can.
Absolutely. Any inside information, you guys have any memories of attending as a fan, whether you worked for the company at some point? I'm going to talk a little bit about some of these announcers that came through ICW. I did a little digging and research onto what these guys were doing and why they ended up with Angelo Poffo, of all people, and things like that. So we're going to definitely, and there's some really fun, and you can take that whichever way you want the term fun, but there's a lot of crazy nonsense that goes on at the TV tapings that I'm sure we're going to really dive into, some storylines and angles and things of that nature. So much more to come in this. This is just the beginning, guys. We're kind of setting the stage, getting it going, and you know who all the players are now, especially the Poffos. So I'm looking forward, man, to coming back and doing this again in a few weeks. And man, it's going to be a fun ride back in time with the ICW.
Absolutely. Just the craziest, wildest promotion. And the fact that they made this thing last for the better part of 5 years is just crazy. Astounding.
It seems impossible.
Yes.
When you don't spend a penny,
Right, exactly.
Well,
all right. Thanks, man. Fun kickoff.
We're going to wrap it up, guys. Thanks so much, Steve, for being here.
My pleasure, as always.